Welcome to year 2 of the Triple Takeover Toycast, the podcast about vintage and modern Transformers, as well as other toy lines from the 80s and 90s. Episode 27 is about Transformers toys that have always worn their masks outdoors, as well as those who wear their sunglasses at night. My co-hosts have returned for a second year of bots and bants, namely, the baby-faced northerner with stars in his light-piped eyes. It's Liam from Toybox Soapbox.
Midlands!
Alongside him, we've got the chap with the sculpted features and many faces he leaves in the box. It's Sixo from Sixo.
Hats in the box, isn't it? Oh, I suppose they do have some faces in the box.
Hats in the bag.
Hats in the bag, faces in the box. Yeah, in that order, maybe.
And I'm M.A.S.K from TFsquareone. Join us as we articulate our jaws on helmets, battle masks, visors, smirks and cyclopes that have turned our heads and caught our eyes. That's right, tonight it's all about Transformers head sculpts. What's shaking, lad?
Other than this fortress?
This is that quiet bit you're on about.
What? Didn't I tell you?
That's it. Man.
No, the thing is, once you write one of these intros and then you finish the intro, it feels a bit like a mic drop moment. That's almost figuratively and literally what happens. The mic drops, and I've got nothing else to say. That was right. Me. That's my contribution. You guys take it over.
All right. I'll follow up. You can edit in other than this fortress because that's funny.
But, I was going to leave this in because this is funny already.
Yeah.
I was also going to leave that in until you said, all right.
Listeners, it's staying. It's staying. We're still here.
Yeah. So after 1 year of this, we still haven't figured out how to start an episode.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe just start with hello for next time. Anyway, how are you, Mez? All right?
I'm not too bad. Thank you very much.
What's going on?
What's happening in Groovetown?
Do you know, having got to the end of 1 year of this podcast, that's 26 episodes, and we finally culminated with RID and Car Robots last time, followed up with a nice spy change of Minisode. I was looking again at that awful wants list that I've created, purely out of a result of these episodes. And I don't know what is more frightening, the fact that if I were to buy everything on that list, the amount of extra stuff that would have come into my home, or the ones that I've ticked off in green on the spreadsheet that have invaded my home. And the worst thing is, now that we're doing the podcast and focusing on the areas of Transformers we really like and going back and correcting mistakes where we've sold things and finally buying grails, I can't turn around and sell anything now to make money back because I don't have anything that falls into that category anymore. Everything I've bought, I've really wanted, sometimes for years. I'm stuck with it now.
I do kind of know what you mean because I think, as I alluded to on a previous episode, if anything, I've kind of got into that realm where there is stuff that I have previously sold to make some cash back or make some space or whatever. And now that's fallen back into the category of stuff that I re-want. So, I'm kind of like genuinely one or two bits. I'm sort of sitting there thinking, yeah, maybe I could track that down again. And that's just absolutely the opposite of where I had planned to be in that respect. All as a result of this podcast.
Yeah, I've had the same problem where I've been trying to sell stuff. And because I've been selling stuff over years, I've thinned my collection down now to everything that I've got. It's the stuff I really want.
But the thing is, the next step is if you find yourself needing to sell more toys, you then get into that point where you have to start basically cutting off limbs. You think, okay, if I say goodbye to this, I'm saying goodbye to it, and I've got to make that decision of what I want to let go of the least or what I want to keep the most. And I thought you go through phases of thinking, oh, I've done this multiple times. You think it gets easier. But I almost think that having gone through a year of picking up toys that we've enabled each other on, I'd almost be making a complete mockery of my own collecting if I ended up selling some of the stuff I've bought in the last year now.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'll see if you can hang on to it for a bit longer. And
I think it's okay. It means I can't buy more, which maybe isn't a bad thing. Because normally it's always been sell a bunch of stuff to buy a bunch of stuff. But now it's just like, don't buy anything for a month or two. And then when you can, buy the next thing on your list that you really wanted. A list that has recently had Brave Sodding Maximus added to it.
Indeed. Lucky draw one as well.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, you're backtracking on that now.
I got some price quotes recently of what people have paid recently. I thought,
I sent you one. I sent you one of them, didn't I? The one bit.
And the sword was like the cheapest thing. That was almost worth considering. But the other thing, the accessories and the multiple thousands, I was like, nah.
I dread to think. I nearly fell off my chair at the sword, I'll be honest. I was like, oof. Any thought I would have ever had about thinking that was a good idea went straight out the window, honestly. Yeah. That was like a cold, hard dose of reality right there.
Yes, a reminder of the sphere in which you collect. Or rather, the sphere in which you don't.
That's the thing. There's always another echelon, isn't there? There's always another tier that is like, just over the hill or whatever. And that sort of stuff, lucky draw stuff, typically is just... is it, isn't it? Really, that's like the, if you're going to get into that
the final frontier.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's almost like you could sort of not really imagine owning like one lucky draw piece, because that in itself is excessive. But then the idea that there are people out there that own several or many of these things, or actually make a point of owning potentially as many of them as they can, that is just I don't know how you do that, really.
See, I love getting to experience this via you guys, because that sort of stuff, like the difficult and obscure stuff like that, doesn't really hold much interest for me. But I love your guys' excitement about stuff like and being involved in it. It's like, oh, it's so good, and getting to enjoy it that way.
I don't know if anything I've gotten recently counts towards that. I mean, I think I've just been buying purely production stuff for some time. Even the stuff that I got, which counts as being pre-production because it has been featured maybe on a box or something like that. It's a special item. It's still a production item. It's just been used for pre-production photography. That's a majority of what I bought recently is just production stuff. I'm not Sixo, you know.
What do you mean you're not? I don't have all of that kind of stuff.
He's just saying it doesn't have.
So is the Lord of Transformers, isn't he?
Right. He's saying he doesn't have Lucky Draw stuff. I guess he doesn't own a reissued Lucky Draw Black Tracks. Then, yeah, I guess.
I do have that actually. I do have Black Tracks. That's right. That's my one, I think. So yeah, maybe there you go. Maybe I am that. So saying that I'm not, but turns out I am. But Black Tracks is like entry-level Lucky Draw, really, isn't it? It's, you know.
I was wondering if you would use that phrase. That's been going through my head. No, I'm not going to go on air as calling Black Tracks entry-level.
It is, though, really. That's like I don't know, that's like everyday Lucky Draw. That's easy Lucky Draw.
I think the most entry-level Lucky Draw are those gold animated Megatron and Prime. Those are still very affordable. I've had those two figures and they were reasonably affordable. Really nice, too.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a whole upper tier of stuff, isn't there? And then there's the stuff that you see once upon a moon in a Generations magazine, like they show you a picture of it, and you're like, oh, that's what it looks like. Like I've never even seen a photo of it before. There's that stuff, and then you get into the realm of like the Binaltech Meister, you know, the one that was that kind of thing that you're just like, pfft. And then there's prototypes of things from 40 years ago, and you know. Like Unicron prototypes and things like that.
Well, at least you've got something to keep you busy for the next 40 years.
Well, this is it. Yeah. Can't wait. I'll have the finest Lucky Draw collection in the retirement home.
This is one of the great things about this podcast is whenever Sixo says, I haven't got this, we can always follow it up with, yet. Because, you know, it's nothing's off the table with you. Even that single Binaltech Jazz, that one that was made, it's the pink one, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even that, it doesn't feel like it's completely beyond Sixo's reach.
That's definitely beyond my reach. Absolutely 100%.
But you wouldn't be surprised. I don't think any of us would be surprised if you did someday get it.
I would.
No.
I would. What are you nodding along with that for, Maz, honestly?
You expect me to get it?
No, I'm expecting you to disagree with him about me getting it.
I don't disagree with him. I literally think anything I link you to now, and I might use the phrase like, oh, it's a bit, you know, you might just win it, because you tend to win everything I link you to.
Nah. Not everything.
Did you get those clear spy changes today, by the way?
Maybe.
Yes. All right. Another tick in the box.
Yep. Well, that might be the end of car robots for me.
Nah.
Other than, I suppose, you know, sort of what you would consider retail car robots, other than your Black Fire convoys and things like that. Black God Magnus.
Lucky Draw Brave Max.
Yeah. Other than that stuff, it's the end of the kind of retail-ish stuff, which is quite nice.
For now.
Speaking of retail, our sponsors. You should say a big shout out to TFSource.com, who sponsor us, all of our main episodes. That's TFSource.com for your Transformers and third-party needs. And we'll be having a look at their site later in the episode. And also Gear for Geeks, who are UK-based. That's gearforgeeks.co.uk. And of course, they have Transformers, M.A.S.K, Turtles, even Diaclone and Microchange, test shots. And they have a really awesome used section, pre-owned Transformers. The kind of place where you can see an animated retail toy, a vintage pre-Transformers mini-bot, and, I don't know, something that came out last week, but also an RID Magnus for £17. Anyone check to see if they're still there? We can come on to that later, I think.
They are. I've just looked at them now.
All right. So thank you to both of them, and we will come back to those with dedicated segments in the middle of the episode. Sixo, do you want to tell our listeners about Patreon?
I would absolutely love to. So we do have a Patreon, which is www.patreon.com/Triple Takeover. And on there, you will find all kinds of wonderful benefits, such as early access to episodes such as this. You will also get outtakes. Sometimes they're very, very funny, and sometimes they're very, very funny and they're about, I don't know, Maz's toilet or something like that. what else do you get? Well, you get Minisodes. That's the main thing. So every week that we don't release a main episode, which is every other week, we do a Minisode instead. So as Maz already mentioned, just this last week, we've done a mini-sode on spy changes, or as I learnt from you, apparently the French is spichangers.
Les spichangers.
Yeah, which I haven't been able to get out of my head. I do actually speak a bit of French and never heard that one, but...
totally fabricated, but it works.
Right.
Sounds like a M.A.S.K pilot, doesn't it? One of the characters from M.A.S.K.
It does
Jacques
a little
Lafleur.
bit. Yes.
Spichanger.
Yes. Is it a good thing if it sounds like the M.A.S.K. cartoon?
Right. Yeah. Please refer to episode 24.
Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, so we have that. So yeah, you can catch the episode on spy changes on there now. And what are we up to now? I think we're on Minisode.
That was Minisode 17.
17, wasn't it? So 17 Minisodes, and they vary from sort of like half an hour up to some of them well over an hour.
Right.
So it just kind of varies a little bit. So we call them Minisodes. Sometimes they're just like regular episodes, actually. Yeah. But yeah, check that out now. Patreon.com/Triple Takeover for all of that good stuff.
And then we've also got our Redbubble store, which is packed full of merch. And recently we added our anniversary merch to it. So all of the covers with the excellent artwork created by Sixo, featuring photography from all of us in a beautiful collage. You can get that on all sorts of things: stationery, leggings, bags, phone cases. And that is redbubble.com/people/triple takeover/explore.
Before we start, I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone who's left me really nice messages and stuff about my grandma, because, well, you may have heard me talk about her a lot on this podcast. She passed away recently, and it's been a hard few weeks, and but it's been nice remembering the good times. And this whole podcast probably wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for her. My interest in Transformers wouldn't be like this. We'd have no Sixo's butlers. We'd not all be here joking about how old M.A.S. is. I wouldn't be sat here spending far too much money on toys that I didn't know I wanted before. But she's had a big impact, and I just want to thank everyone who's left me messages on Twitter, because I know they're there. I just haven't been able to bring myself to look at them. So I'm not being rude and ignoring it. It's very real and very raw. But I'd just like to say thank you to everyone, and to my grandma, really, for all of this, because it wouldn't have been possible without her.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear, indeed.
And thank you to you guys for being lovely guys.
Well, thank you for sharing that as well, Liam. That's really quite special. So
I feel like I should have had a proper speech, and I've been actually thinking about it for ages, but I just haven't thought of anything that would do it justice. But I just want to acknowledge it now and just say,
no, of course, it's a difficult one, isn't it? So
yeah.
I will maybe just correct you on one thing, that I never joke about how old M.A.S. is. It's a very serious subject, actually.
Can I just say how mortified I am that has found its way into such a touching segment on the show?
Well, we're all feeling it, aren't we? We're all feeling old.
No one feels it more than me. No one feels my age more than me.
I was going to say, you're certainly a bit touchy about it.
Right, moving on.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Just wanted to
of course, mate.
get that out there.
And well deserved. Absolutely well deserved. Obviously, we didn't know her very well at all, but just the stories on this podcast, people have referred to her as the fourth member of the podcast.
Yeah.
She's almost the founding member of the podcast.
That's true.
I would have loved to have explained what a podcast was to her, because it was hard enough explaining how DVDs worked. Trying to explain it. It's like the radio, but no, it would have been, can I tune it in after JMAO? I was like, no.
But I really hope those comments on Twitter, that when you do eventually get around to reading them, bring you the comfort. And I hope this podcast is anywhere remotely a suitable tribute to her, because she is certainly someone who deserves that sort of tribute and to be immortalized in this way.
Yeah, myself and my family really appreciate it. So thank you.
So this week, we're talking about head sculpts on Transformers. And if this was already a niche hobby, occasionally about niche toy lines, we are now talking about a niche body part on a niche toy line within a niche hobby. So first of all, we're going to look at what makes a great head sculpt and why it's important. Well, what makes a great head sculpt?
Well, it's a really difficult one. I was thinking about this beforehand. I think it's kind of individual, the different toys, isn't it? But actually, I was going to say, I don't think it's that niche a topic, only because for me, it's the real embodiment of the character, actually, a lot of times. Like, if anything, you can have a fantastic toy, amazing design overall, fantastic transformation, looks brilliant. But if the head sculpt is off, it just kills it. For me, anyway. Like, that's just me. Like, I was looking at that third-party Raiden that's doing the rounds at the moment earlier, And I love it. I really love the design, everything. But just the nose is just off. I don't know. There's something about the face that just doesn't work as well for me. And it's a killer. And I still like the look of it, but it's hard to get over a bad face sculpt. So I think it's just something about it that really kind of embodies the character and just kind of communicates to you the personality of the toy that you're holding.
Well, I think I should explain that. I don't mean head sculpts aren't important, but I just figured that by year 2, we probably still had quite a few topics to cover before we started talking about specific body parts of Transformers. But yes, it's character, it's identity.
It'll be knees next.
Yeah. It's a connection, isn't it? You can make a connection with a toy based on what you see in its face, because it's a humanization of alien robots and toys and inanimate objects, because we've seen them in their animated form, and that's one of the... I mean, that's where the camera will focus most of its time in a cartoon, is on a robot's face doing the talking. So that's
100%.
Where we make a lot of our connection.
Well, and in toy photography, it's the bit that you always want, or 99% of the time you want in focus, particularly for where you're kind of varying the focus of what you do and things like that a bit. Typically speaking, it's the face that you want in focus. It is probably, in some ways, one of the most defining parts and important parts of any toy. I mean, it's a different thing, of course, but, I was looking, the other day, a couple of people sharing pictures of a new, I don't know what it is Hot Toys or something, Scarlet Witch figure that's doing the rounds. I'm not sure if it's Hot Toys, actually, maybe something like that. And, picking up on the face sculpt and how close it looks to Elizabeth Olsen, and, the facial expression that the figure is pulling is a little bit weird. And all of that, and it clearly just throws it all off. And actually, the toy overall looks pretty good. Do you know what I mean? But it's the fact that if the face is off, it's just not quite right. But I think even though it's robots, you still have that element of it with Transformers. There's still that kind of, I don't know, slight uncanny valley that you get sometimes if the face sculpt's not quite right.
It's also how when you first meet people, isn't it? You see anyone, you look at their face. That's how you interact with people in general. So that's how you would look at a toy when they've got human proportion. You would automatically look at their face to get a sense of who they are.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
That's true.
Yeah.
So many of these face sculpts, that's where they convey so much of the personality from these toys as well. It comes from those face sculpts.
So is that how we would answer that question then? What makes a good face sculpt? Is it's recognizable, it has character, and it allows you to have a connection with the toy?
I guess so. I was going to say, because I guess you could say, it's got to be a bit distinct or have a bit of personality to it. But there are some very generic face sculpts out there as well, which also work very nicely for what they do. So it doesn't have to be something too extreme. It doesn't, like some of the Beast Wars faces are really, really, really out of town in terms of what they do. The facial expressions, the design of them, they're asymmetric. They really push the boat out. But I don't think it has to always be like that. Like, I'm thinking some of my favorite G1 head sculpts are quite generic, actually, in a funny way. Stuff like Landcross and things like that are really nice, but they're not immediately distinct.
Just a moment. If anyone is playing along with Triple Takeover Sixo Bingo, in case you missed it, you've already had third-party Beast Wars and Japanese exclusives. So make sure you mark those on your card, and don't forget to shout out Bingo when you have the whole set.
Right.
Did they not shout house or like a Fort Mac base mode or something like that?
Do continue.
Unbelievable. I was about to mention Galaxy Shuttle, actually, believe it or not. But,
Bingo, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Or Lucky Draw or something.
Only because, right, like if you look at Galaxy Shuttle, that head is, to me, one of the classic G1 heads. Like, it's beautiful, beautiful head sculpt, but there's nothing really remarkable about it. Like, if you sketched it without the body, just the head, would you know who it was? How many people on social media would go, that's Galaxy Shuttle? Probably not all that many, actually. But still, I look at the toy, and every time I think that is a belter. So I don't think it has to be super, super distinctive as such. I just think that in that case, it's the sculpt is really clean. The design of it is really nice. It's visually appealing. It's easy to read. So I think some of those things are important as well. But what I do quite like in Transformers is the complete array of head sculpts that you get as well. So I think it's really hard to quantify what it is that makes a good head sculpt as such, just because they can be so different.
I think Hosehead falls into the same category as Galaxy Shuttle. It's just that generic, classic G1 handsome look, which maybe you wouldn't recognize without the body and the helmet for the junior headmaster style thing. If you just saw the face, you'd be like, that's really nice. But it could be anybody, really. And
then at the other end of the scale, though, you have characters like Shockwave. They have such distinct and unique faces, like in any kind of facial features, but you still gravitate to that on the toy, and it still conveys personality. And I think that's such a part of a head sculpt, is no matter what it looks like, is that you get a sense of something from it. Because you mentioned the Toybox, the third-party ones, and I was thinking of the Open and Play. Remember they did a Springer?
Mm-hmm.
You're right, yeah.
And the face, it wasn't that it didn't
Yeah.
look like Springer, it just looked awkward. And no matter how you looked at that toy, every
So
other part
true.
could have looked amazing,
Right.
but you would so just taken with that face, like you couldn't look at anything else.
Yeah, that was like the ultimate example, wasn't it? I remember
Mhm.
everybody, like literally everybody loved that toy in terms, well, I'm sure not everybody, but like, in terms of the design of it. The finish was a little bit lacking, but generally speaking, the design was super cool. But nobody could get over the face, man. Everybody was like, what have they done? It's the same with that Fans Toys Perceptor as well, wasn't it? Like, it,
You're right.
generally,
Tesla.
yeah, it had its own faults, but the face was really the thing that kind of killed it and just makes such a difference.
It does, and you can see the extreme lengths people go to with toys to change that. Like you had there people fudging in faceplates from other toys, weren't they? They were taking faceplates off Masterpiece Inferno and Grapple and stuff like that. People tinker with toys a lot, but it's always the face. People go that extra mile, like a third-party head replacement and stuff like that. It's a really important part of a toy, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's ultimately the bit that kind of helps you identify with that toy in a funny kind of way, isn't it? It's the bit that really makes or breaks it. Like, it's funny to me that you can have a 99% perfect toy, but if the face is off, it doesn't work. You can't get on with it that well. It's just bizarre.
But the opposite is true as well, isn't it? If you have a toy that owns a fantastic head sculpt, like a legitimate classic, you can forgive it quite a lot of other things. Proportions, simplicity, transformation, because when you're sitting looking at it in robot mode, it's a pleasure and you enjoy that face sculpt as it's probably the most recognizable part of its look and aesthetic in robot mode, which is how probably 99% of the fandom display their Transformers. You can forgive it virtually everything else because it has such a fantastic head sculpt. I'm just trying to think of an example of one now, but I mean, there must be quite a lot in later year G1 which would fall into that category.
Good face sculpt pulls everything together, doesn't it? No matter how anything else looks. A bad face sculpt just destroys everything else. No matter how good the rest of the toy is, all you can see is that face. It's like the star on top of a Christmas tree, isn't it? You look at the tree and it's great, but your eyes always look at what the star is. It's the most recognizable part.
I'm amazed we've got this far in, Liam, and you haven't mentioned G1 Blur yet.
Oh, it's coming.
I'm sure it
ready.
is. I'm sure it is. He sat right next to me, funnily enough. That's what made me think of him. So just with that old face sculpt. But you're absolutely right. It is like the cherry on top, isn't it? And it's I don't know, but to the same token, if it's not there, it's like a real problem. Like if it doesn't kind of equate with how you want it to look or whatever. I don't know about you, but I always remember as well when I was little, the head and the face being the bit that I always enjoyed revealing through the first transformation. And I think we've mentioned previously that I think all of us have a bit of a thing about transformations that start in vehicle mode or alternate mode, because that was, typically how a lot of stuff was packaged back in the day, most like 99% of stuff anyway. And these days, obviously, it varies a little bit, but I still prefer toys that come in alternate mode, just because even if you've seen pictures of it online or whatever, there's something about that reveal of that face sculpt for the first time in hand that is just wonderful, if it's a good one. Mm-hmm. And I remember as a kid just like transforming toys, getting to the bit where the face comes out and just being like, oh, wow, so that's what it looks like. I guess because you wouldn't have been as familiar with it back then. You wouldn't have necessarily known what the heads looked like. It just always struck me as a big moment.
Yeah.
It's always the bit that's called out as well, though, like in animation and comics and stuff. Even as far as like Gundam, Transformers, anything like that, when the robot head always comes out last, doesn't it? And so even when the rest of the transformation sped up, it's usually the bit that's slowed down is where the head is revealed at the end.
Yeah.
It feels like the ta-da moment.
Like that really cool 1986 movie Devastator transformation where he's kind of piling up all the robots and it's the head that just like kind of slowly emerges at the last minute, isn't it? And then that's the like, oh, here we go kind of moment. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
So does that answer your question?
It absolutely does not.
I don't know
what the question was.
Well, it was if we what makes a good head sculpt?
Yeah, I was hoping for an example of one of those that has a great head sculpt, but the rest of the toy is just a bit like, could be.
I was trying to think.
Battle Charger, Jump Starter, but as long as it's got a head sculpt that good, you just accept it. I mean, a good example of a Transformers toy with a successful head sculpt where you can forgive most other things is just take Action Master Croc, for example. It's not a transforming toy, but it has such an excellent head sculpt and it looks like such a good robot as a result that you can happily display that alongside transforming toys, and that is a really lovely display piece, and it makes Croc desirable, as well as his character does in the recent More Than Meets the Eye comics. But that toy doesn't need to transform into something fantastic. It doesn't have to be a legendary transformation or have perfect proportions. It just looks great because of its head sculpt, and that's doing a lot of work for that toy.
Yeah, I actually really agree with that. I think Action Masters is kind of a good example generally because so many of the head sculpts are spot on. I mean, there are a couple I'm not so keen on, like Devastator in that line, funnily enough. But generally speaking, I think most of the Action Master head sculpts absolutely nail it. And there are loads of great examples like Treadshot and some of the other original characters. Mainframe, just spot on, absolutely brilliant, rad. They just look great. And they really kind of sell to you the character that you've got in hand there, even though it's a non-transforming toy. And there are other good sculpted details on them, but definitely the head sculpts in Action Masters are strong.
And that counts when those toys are homaged years later, because you'll take a completely different body, and you're talking about Action Masters. I'm thinking about the Revenge of the Fallen Lockdown that then came out as Circuit and AXA, and they got the head sculpts for those so right that you will absolutely believe that that's who it is, even though the toy is obviously Spiky Muscle Car Lockdown. But those TFCC exclusives were gorgeous because the head sculpts were just nailed on.
Isn't that the thing, though, where like you can have a toy that is representative of another character, and the body can be completely different. Like it can even be a different color, completely different alternate mode, completely unrecognizable. But as long as it's got the right head on it, you're like, yeah, it's that character. Typically speaking, it's so important in that regard that it just sort of transcends everything else. Yeah. Trying to think of an example of that now.
Well, I was just about to bring up Vinyl Tech and alternators, but then I was thinking, well, then you've got something like Dead End, which is just Sunstreaker, but different colors. But it works because they somehow made that head look evil, and through just working with what they had, it's completely believable, and it doesn't even look like Dead End. It doesn't have Dead End's head at all compared to the original G1 Dead End. So I've just basically ruined that point.
Yeah, you've kind of made the anti-point, if anything.
But it's such a well-sculpted head, and it's such a beautifully molded head. It's like, hey, I don't care.
Yeah.
It could be Optimus. Who cares? It's just so pretty.
A lot of the head sculpts in alternators and Vinyl Tech are great. I mean, actually, Optimus head's probably the ultimate example, isn't it? Because you take something like Vinyl Tech Convoy, or alternators Optimus Prime.
One of the best Optimus head sculpts ever.
It's fantastic Optimus Prime head sculpt.
Favourite part of that toy.
I think actually Optimus heads is really the main thing here, because they have a lot of commonalities, faceplate, the eyes maybe, the little visor crest thing, a lot of those elements, the earmuffs, but they're not, even some of that is not 100% common in every Optimus design. But still, there's something about them that even when they're slapped onto something like Vinyl Tech Convoy, which has no other real hallmarks other than being red and blue, you would not know it was an Optimus design, really, let's be fair.
True.
But it is Optimus when you see it. Instantly.
The grey PlayStation.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Optimus's head is like a crown, though, isn't it? It's like the king of toys. The second you see it, you know what it is. It's that instantly recognizable, no matter what it's on.
It's a bit of a standout case, though.
Yeah.
Because throughout the years, Megatron, who is equally recognizable, has had far more variation in his heads, hasn't he?
He has. I guess I was thinking of the G2 version, which is classic Megatron head in a different color, admittedly, but whacked on a massive bodybuilder tank type frame, and still it's Megatron. So, but that has happened a few times. But the heads have varied a lot more, though, it is fair to say. I guess movie Megatron changes bodies all the time, doesn't he? And actually the first 3 heads in the movie trilogy, up to Dark of the Moon, the heads are basically identical, but the bodies are completely different, and yet you're never in doubt about who it is necessarily.
So that recognition aspect is important too. But then it doesn't have to be. For example, you completely sold me on Armada Megatron with the picture of the head sculpt. And it didn't look like G1 Megatron by any stretch, or a recognizable Megatron, but it just looked so good on that toy. I wanted that toy, and I still want that toy, and I don't care what the rest of it does. I got that fans hobby version of it because I wanted that head sculpt somehow represented, and I'm still looking for like an original Armada Megatron I want to buy. So I think, honestly, what makes a great head sculpt is good looks, man.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a slight element of feeling right. Like I often mention this when I write about toys. I often mention that something just feels right, and it's sort of maybe it's a bit of a cop out. I don't know, because it's sort of a bit of a nondescript way of describing something ultimately. But there is that sort of unexplainable quality about them sometimes. Like I can look at a head sculpt and it just feels right for that character or feels right for that toy, and it just speaks to me.
And it doesn't fit any other criteria of why other head sculpts look good. For example, old Robots in Disguise Skybite. That is a bizarre head sculpt. Obviously, it's Cybershark originally. But on that toy, that head sculpt is spot on, and it's great.
Well, I think I said in the Car Robots episode that I was so unsure about what you were going to make of that toy when you got it in hand and saw that face sculpt up close. That was the one thing that I was like, pretty sure he'll like the toy overall, but the head, don't know. It might.
But it's the cartoon. It's a beautiful representation of the cartoon, which
Yeah.
is what I came across first, even though the cartoon is drawn off the toy, so obviously the toy is accurate. But again, that's another thing. It's that recognition thing. It's that representation of what I really like on screen on a toy, which is that toy's success as a head sculpt as well, and its uniqueness. I think I've ruined the point again. By just making another one.
You've added to the point. You've added
Right.
colour to it. That's what it is. Context.
Looking at the evolution of head sculpts in Transformers, starting right at the origins in Diaclone, Microchange series, even things like the pre-Shockwave and pre-Omega Supreme, how have those head sculpts evolved throughout the eras of Transformers, from G1 through G2, or even just G1 through to movie era G1 and onwards?
I think hugely. I mean, I guess when you look at the pre-TF era, Diaclone, Microchange, all of that clobber, I think there's a lot there that is kind of more traditional robot style, isn't it? They were obviously reinterpreted by the cartoon and the comic with much more of a kind of humanoid face shape for a lot of them. Some of them were kept, like Prime, for example, but even then they were given a bit more kind of recognizable humanoid quality with the eyes and things like that.
Yeah, far less robotic,
Yeah.
non-sentient automaton kind of
exactly
faces.
I mean, the obvious examples are things like Brawn, isn't it? Which typically on the toy was a very hard to read. I mean, I love it. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a great head sculpt, but it's out there. It's a bit more kind of like lifeless automaton sort of head sculpt.
G1 Wheeljack,
Right?
Fabulous example.
Yeah, I mean, what is that really? It's it's bizarre, and of course that was interpreted wrong in a way,
Yes.
wasn't it? For the cartoon, they got the wrong bit for his visor and everything, which is kind of weird. So that's a funny story by itself. But I think you moved very quickly from this kind of classic sort of sci-fi robot look through to something which was distinctly more humanoid. And then the kind of ultimate extension of that in the 80s was the movie, of course, which started as anime designs. And you've really, you can see the influence from Star Wars there.
Facial hair.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, literal facial hair on some, at least two of the robots. And, stuff like Springer, who's clearly your Indiana Jones type. You've got RC with a with a Princess Leia buns, and it's so obvious. Even Hot Rod in the sort of Luke Skywalker role, it's so obvious that these head designs and face sculpts are coming from that place. And you see that translated loosely into the toys, even in Blur. And
Optimus Prime's old man face.
Right, exactly. But you really got
Obi
that.
Cup Kenobi.
Yeah, exactly. You got that personality in for the first time, didn't you? Where you'd not had that previously in Transformers.
More humanized, aren't they?
Definitely.
I think so.
Yes, exactly that. And then later G1 sort of plays with that a little bit, but later G1 kind of finds its wheelhouse a little bit and sticks with it, doesn't it? It kind of goes into that.
But it's still a real mix, isn't it? For example, you've got Slugslinger, who looks like it's a human face inside a robotic helmet.
That's true.
Bit. You've got that sort of aesthetic that
he's got a very smooth face, doesn't he? And then some of them are very like hard angles and things.
Yeah, you've got stuff like the Headmasters, which are very different to those Target Masters in terms of what those aesthetic is in that head. Super blocky, super segmented, I guess, with the toys. Because sometimes you kind of think where Chrome Dome's eyes are, but then there's actually it's that bar above his actual painted face bit. So I think I got that wrong as a kid. I sort of saw his eyes somewhere else.
I think I did.
But then you get something like Slugslinger and Misfire where it's completely obvious how that face is put together. Yeah, it's a different aesthetic going on. You got something like Wheelie, little Happy Go Wheelie. His face under the toilet seat is another thing completely.
Yeah, exactly. The urinal, I know. Yeah.
How come you don't love that toy more, Liam? I don't understand.
I don't either.
Maybe that's why he looks so horrified, because he's being flushed away into his own.
Could you take that like frightening flush toy that you've got and just sort of transplant Wheelie's face in under the lid? I think that would be perfect.
That's the episode art for this. This one.
That's sorted. Yeah, I guess you do have a bit of it. So I suppose what I meant was that there's a real archetype in later G1. I don't know why the name that springs to mind for me actually is stuff like Road Handler and Countdown and things like that, which have that, they're Micromasters, but they have that very kind of typical square jaw, square features, sort of, with a cool head design type look. And I think there is a lot of that in G1. which really, really works. It kind of comes back to stuff like Galaxy Shuttle and things like that again, I guess. I guess then you get things like Pretenders and Bludgeon and all the kind of out there things as well. So there's a lot of experimentation with it for sure.
But even the little headmaster units, their little tiny humanoid heads are quite roboty like that in that traditional robot way, aren't they?
They are. I really like those head designs as well on those little Nebulan dudes. They look great. But yeah, and then I think in G2, you got some more slightly less humanoid features. Like you got stuff like old Dreadwing and the Autoformers and things like that, which really had more kind of like unusual shaped heads. Like Dreadwing has a real kind of dome head.
Clinch is a real funny one, isn't it?
Clinch, actually, do you know what that reminds me of? Is a movie-verse, like a Bayformer Decepticon.
Yeah.
It has that. And actually, a lot of the Decepticons from that era have that kind of insectoid look to them almost. Even stuff like Skyquake and things like that all have that kind of slight bug look to them almost. It's hard to explain.
There's a very 90s comic vibe to those, isn't there? Of the time, like Dev's head and stuff like that, and how he was changing.
Yeah.
So certain characters like that, like Clench is one. It feels like it could have come out an Image comic somewhere.
Gosh, you're so right, actually. You're on the money with that comparison, I think, totally. So yeah, that was a total era for weird stuff. And I think maybe that just carried into G2 a bit.
Is Calcar considered G2, or is that like a back-end G1 kind of
G1
pyro sort of thing? Because that's another one that always stood out to me as very, very different to what had come before.
It's all that same era. It's all like Turbomaster era. It's those couple of years. So yeah, Calcar is a weird one. Again, very kind of bug-like. Sort of, and there is, as I say, there's just something about those designs that makes me think of the Bayformer Decepticons. You know, that kind of like mandibles look to them almost. I seem to be the only person that makes that comparison, but it works in my head.
Because even some of the Predator jets, don't they? They've got very spiky heads, like almost like they're wearing crowns and pointy. So a sort of degree, haven't they? They're less square and blocky. The faces are, but the helmets and stuff are a bit more ornate. Almost.
Yeah. I think they definitely experimented a bit with that.
It's like the ultimate representation of Transformers moving into new eras is the way head sculpts have changed. Yeah. Because you could still pick up a Monstructor little Pretender monster and look at its head and be like, that's a very G1 toy. But as soon as they start putting on those heads, like you're talking about, these spikes and this insectoid sort of look, that's when you put that next to your G1 Transformers and things have changed. You know, things have really moved on design-wise to new directions. And it's the same with modern Transformers. You know, like you look at things like you were saying Bayformers, that is such a fundamental shift in design from even things like car robots, alternators, Unicron trilogy, then Bosch, you know, you suddenly got Bayformers, which is a completely different evolution of head design.
I think that's it. I think up until Bayformers, in a funny way, you can see like with a lot of stuff, like with gimmicks, you can see the evolution from one line to the next. Like you can see
the DNA,
yeah, you can see the thread, the strand from G1 to G2, like particularly with the European stuff. You know, you can kind of link it in there and see where it's going. All right, it takes a few leaps, and there are individual toys that maybe kind of, you know, push the boundaries along a little bit, but you see it. And then into Beast Wars, you know, that in the 3 or 4 years that Beast Wars was around, you can truly see how the head sculpts go from a fairly, mostly quite standard place to start with. You know, like obviously some of them, like Optimus Prime, taking cues from G1 Transformers even, and there are some weird ones at the start, don't get me wrong. But, you know, by year 3, particularly by the time the Transmetal 2s roll round, you've got some very weird stuff going on. You know, you've got all kinds of like fangs and, like, as I say, very asymmetric head sculpts. You've got stuff that isn't really recognizable as like a traditional Transformers face in a lot of regards.
Cyber Shark is a great example.
Yeah, exactly. Just you know, those kinds of things, and some really kind of insectoid, weird, animalistic ones. Some that don't look like robots at all, but then you can kind of see that strand stretching through into RID, car robots, as you sort of said, and then in some ways that leads on to the Unicron trilogy. And you know, I'm just naming lines now, but you can see sort of the strand of it all. But then Bayformers came along in 2007 and just, I don't know, like wrote its own script basically, didn't it?
Yeah. Insert exploded drinks can meme, I suppose.
Yeah.
One of the problems I always had is I struggled to find the eyes, and that's one of the reasons I find those designs so difficult. No matter what the robots look like, I can often can't find the eyes, which then makes it really hard to find the face. I don't know if anyone else has ever had that.
I can understand that. I think I actually do really like a lot of the Bayformer designs, as you know, and you know, despite what everyone can say about the films, I do think a lot of the designs work, but I can see why people find them confusing as well, because they are cluttered. And the head sculpts, yeah. I mean, particularly where they've got almost like not one particular eye, they've got like a bit of an eye here and then like another bit in the forehead or something.
Some of them have
and then,
slits across them, which
then
it's hard to track where the face isn't. Like it was only recently where I worked out where Ratchet's actual face was. Like I knew obviously where it was.
Yeah.
I was only looking at it when, they're the features. It's taken me years to actually look at it and go,
well, even Prime, one thing I always think was weird about Bayform's Prime's original design is that he's got those slits across the eye almost. He's got those little, I don't know what you call them, but those little sort of bits over his eye.
Venetian blinds.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, it's like that, isn't it?
Someone's in there just pulling a little bit of string.
Yeah. But it's a strange choice. It's I suppose if I'm honest, like I love that design, I love that robot design, everything. That particular aspect of it, I could live without. Just because I think if the eyes were a bit cleaner, it would look really cool. And it would probably read to a lot of people as more classic Optimus. Just because the eyes would be more kind of recognizable, I suppose, as you were saying, Liam.
Yeah, and it's just sometimes it's having just a very clear and distinct face that you can look at quickly. With some of those, you get lost trying to work out where you're looking for the emotion and stuff.
Also, I think a lot of it comes from recognition for us, and it's that whole thing about being able to pick up a transformer and knowing how it transforms while looking at the lines on it. Because I've shown a number of transformers to my wife, for example. I've said, look at this amazing thing. And she's mistaken where the head on it is sometimes because she's not completely up with the aesthetic of different lines. So she'll look at it for a moment and say, oh, that's where the head is. She was looking somewhere completely different, because they don't always have those very typical human proportions like you get with Masterpiece Transformers, which are very based on the models, which obviously were drawn to look as humanoid as possible. For example, I'd love to know what she makes of G1 Ironhide, for example, if I ever said, hey, what do you think of this guy? But there are even humanoid Transformers where she's not been able to immediately see where the head on that robot is. And that sort of, we have this sort of filter that we can immediately spot these features on toys. But if even we can't immediately pick out facial features, yeah, that's great that there's more diversity, but also it maybe hinders connection every now and then.
I'm actually just wondering now, as we've kind of got onto the topic, with something like Bayformers Prime, if that design, because what we were saying before about Optimus heads and, being able to recognize it's an Optimus Prime, even despite the body shape changing, all of that. I wonder if when 2007 or even 2006 rolled around and that concept art landed, I wonder how people would have felt about it if the head was classic Optimus. Like if the head was immediate, G1 Prime, yeah, it could have been an evolution of it. It could have been different, as many convoy heads have been over the years. But I wonder if it was just a little bit more spot on to kind of in people's mind's eye of Optimus Prime, if the body and everything else would have been easier to swallow.
Yeah, well, look at the reaction to the Bumblebee movie, Optimus Prime head. Like, that's beloved because it's so much more G1, but it's got so much more detail because it's movie-like, isn't it? Like, imagine that on that first movie, Optimus Prime body.
Well, you don't have to imagine it. You can see it in the concept boards that they put out during BotCon of that year. You can see how those heads evolved from... Even Bumblebee was a really good example of... And Jazz, seeing how those evolutions of those drawings ended up where they ended up.
Yeah, some of them almost overnight. It was like it's so weird seeing all those concept artwork and how they went through that. It was almost like they went home on a Friday with something fairly classic, thought about it over the weekend and came back and went, nah, let's start again on that one. And it's like, it just takes this sudden leap from something recognizable to something weird that then like somehow morphs into what we saw on screen. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and maybe it was a representation of them trying to disconnect people from everything that had happened in the past and accept it as a completely new thing. That is also personified in their faces.
Like we were saying earlier about, you look at people's faces for their expressions. Even the cartoons, like you look how many toys come with different faces. They're smiling, they're screaming, they're growling or whatever. But in the movies, you never really see that. You don't really remember expressions on their faces. You don't remember them smiling or growling because there's so much going on. They're not distinct in that same way. Like if you think of, is it MP44 Megatron? Is that what number he is? The V2 one.
MP36.
Yeah.
36 even, yeah. He comes with 400 different faces, doesn't he? And the laughing one is incredible. And that's so what you think of when you think of G1 Megatron. That's a spot on face.
That's a good point, actually. That's probably one of the best head sculpts, face sculpts on any Transformers toy ever.
It's on my list today.
And mine, but it conveys that character so well. But when you think of the movies, I wouldn't picture Ironhide smiling or screaming or growling, or even what his face is doing. And same for Optimus Prime, even when you see his faceplate, you don't get a range of that in those movies, just because those faces are so busy and there's so much going on.
I think the only one I can remember pulling any sort of expression was Lockdown in Age of Extinction. And that's because he had a very humanoid face.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great example, because even you look at like Bumblebee, the marquee character, doesn't have a mouth. Optimus Prime has a faceplate, but he does have a mouth in the film a lot, but he doesn't really do much but talk with it. And you know, the cartoons are different because they are drawn so humanoid, but they're given very human faces in the way they express and emote.
Conversely, I would say that the Bumblebee movie, again, we're falling into a little bit of a stereotype with this conversation in a way, but the Bumblebee movie, they took the Bumblebee design from the 2007, or the Bayformers films, and tweaked it, but it is more G1 at the time, like G1 toy. There's different elements to it, isn't there? They've kind of captured the Bayformer look, but when you compare 2007 Bumblebee with Bumblebee side by side, they're not that similar actually, but there's enough going on in the design that you can sort of recognize it as being the same character, even though actually side by side they're quite different. But then there's enough of the G1 toy in it as well that you can also kind of get that cue from it. But then they've also allowed that character to emote quite a bit on screen, I think. Like, you know when he's happy, you know when he's sad. Come the end scene where, spoiler alert, he's saying goodbye to Charlie and all of that. It's very clear what he's feeling. And I think that's a real strength of that film and that model that they created for that character, that I don't know, you don't get that in the same way with the original design for Bumblebee. You have to hear what he's feeling through the radio, don't you?
Yeah, or how he poses his body, don't you? You can tell his emotions from the way his shoulders sink, or when he's dancing, stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's very physically done, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's mad. I'm looking at that Bumblebee from the Bumblebee movie, and I never clocked that there was a G1 aesthetic in that face for the G1 toy, but I can clearly see what you're talking about now.
Do you see it? You see it? Yeah,
I see it. Yes, I had completely missed that.
Yeah, for a second I thought you were going to tell me I was imagining it.
No, I'd completely missed it. The mask is so obviously there, even though there's stuff on top of it.
I think it was a conscious choice. Yeah, it's a conscious choice. I swear they looked at the 2007 film, or whatever films had come before with Bumblebee, and I swear they went, okay, look, we're going to rewrite all of these other characters. Ironhide, all of that will look like the G1 cast, fine. But Bumblebee, we need that link. And they found what I think is honestly an exceptional crossover between the Bayformers films and the G1 toy. And I think they nailed it, in my opinion. Absolutely nailed it.
I think that's a good description of the movie generally.
Yeah.
I think the movie vibe. But going back to our discussion on head sculpts, so we've talked about how they evolved. Is it fair to say that things like Beast Wars and the Bay movie era are the greatest departures from what would be the base level of what you'd expect of a Transformers toy head sculpt? Are those, in your opinions, the biggest departures from them?
I guess Beast Wars / Machines, because that is some of the Beast Machines designs are truly out there as well. Like, even at the time, I remember Beast Machines felt like a departure from Beast Wars, actually, with stuff like the Viacon drones and things like that, because they were, again, very non-humanoid. Beast Wars actually, if anything, had gone very, very, very humanoid at that point. Kind of with an animalistic twist, but they were maybe not even humanoid, but just very organic, So a lot of the face sculpts, because particularly with Transmetals, you'd had this thing with kind of more organic robot forms and more techno, beast modes. A lot of the faces on the robots were almost unrecognizable as robots. Stuff like Silverbolt is probably a good example.
Yeah, I was thinking of Silverbolt and Air Razor straight away, like Fusils. It was just my mind went there.
That's not an obvious robot. You wouldn't look at Silverbolt. He looks like a wolf, really.
Dogbird.
Or the Dogbird, yeah, that's what he is.
The winged wolf.
He doesn't look like it'd have wires underneath that or whatever so much. It's a very organic face sculpt.
Don't think he had anything underneath there, to be honest.
He's all right, old Silverbolt. He's got a good heart. That's the main thing. So, but that's a topic for another day. More on that later. And but I think then you come on to Beast Machines, and the face sculpts are so purposely away from that to contrast the Viacons with the Maximals. You've got stuff like Tankor and all of those guys who just is almost back to Diaclone level of robotic faces, and that's a real shift for sure.
The RID Car Brothers as well are another good example of where the heads don't feel anything like G1 in that sense, do they? Because they're all very asymmetrical. Well, what's his face is Cyburn in particular, and X-Brawn.
Yeah, but I don't know what it is, man. It's just something maybe about their overall aesthetic that felt like it was very much in line with Transformers. Like I had no difficulty accepting them as Transformers from Cybertron. I don't know what it was about, especially Sideburn. Like obviously he has that thing over one of his eyes. I would have thought something like Skybite with his half mouth being different and half his face being completely different was a better example of how that line shifted things along. But no, I don't know what it was about Sideburn and X-Brawn and Prowl. I accepted them immediately. Was it because they're cars and I'm that simply wired upstairs? Maybe I don't know, but
yes.
That
was literally it. I mean, I think those guys are all quite a continuation from Beast Wars. I know we talked about it in terms of articulation and stuff, but Sideburn. If you pop that head on a Beast Wars toy, it wouldn't look out of place.
It's Silverbolt as a car.
Yeah,
but then everything is Silverbolt in Transformers, isn't it? Really,
it's all that one mold.
Like that is the central nexus of all Transformers entities is a Silverbolt of some description.
Yeah, I think actually in more recent years, if anything, it's where you don't have some of those quite as distinct head sculpts. I guess maybe because so many now modern toys are harkening back to eras from the past, aren't they? Mm-hmm. You're not necessarily pushing into new territories all the time. And even where you are, it's still sort of slightly in homage to something that's already come. So, I mean, what was the last real big new era? I guess actually RID 2015.
Yep.
That's a real out there.
Yes.
That's proper bizarre.
But again, like I'm thinking of something like Bisque or Steeljaw from that line. Those two Transformers turn into vehicles, but it's almost like they're using the robot mode to invoke a beast mode. And I don't think it's a million miles away from Beast Wars, even though they're mostly beast heads. Although I suppose Clampdown is a little bit like that crab from SpongeBob SquarePants, isn't he?
Moose Tractor has a fantastic head.
Yeah.
Thunderhoof.
Thunderhoof.
That guy, yeah, that one.
Actually, you're right. It is a departure, but it's a wonderful departure.
It is a departure. Isn't there there's a frog one who actually has the tongue or something? Or am I imagining that?
That's right. No, that's true.
Like that. There are a couple.
Springback? I don't know what it's called. I've forgotten.
And there's the dude that is in the first episode that eats metal.
Underbite,
thank you. And stuff like that, that's a real departure. That's a real thing out on its own.
Speaking about departures, I cannot wait to do an episode on RID 2015.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Because I get to watch the show and then the seasons I haven't seen, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Have you not seen it all?
No, I haven't, which is mad. They just stopped being available to us at a time.
Cartoon. Good. I've seen all of it, man.
But yeah, you're right. That was another big departure. And I guess it's no surprise that has stuck in my memory as a high point in recent years of Transformers design experimentation. I was going to mention animated as well, but the thing is, Transformers animated, it was just an art style. It wasn't necessarily that the designs of the faces didn't match former eras, because they really, really do. But it's an art style that brought something out, and that was evident in the toys.
I agree. I think animated is fantastic, but yes, it's like when you see a very stylized drawing of a classic G1 character, almost, isn't it? It's
like Studio Ox style, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not so much that it's the features and things that are unusual, so much as the way it's drawn that makes it more distinct. So speaking of, we're just talking briefly there about kind of modern toys and how they reference stuff from the past and whatever else. Of course, the obvious example in many respects is Masterpiece, and the fact that, the designs there, particularly now, are so focused on the past, and kind of homaging something to really kind of the perfect degree, so we were talking about Megatron, things like that as being the kind of, I suppose, like the perfect embodiment, isn't it, of, well, that's what they set out to be, of that character in toy form. Kind of if you would imagine classic cartoon Megatron, this is, with MP36, that's what you see right there.
Yeah.
I think
that was their philosophy.
Yeah.
For a lot of them, but I feel like they missed with some, but they really landed with Megatron and something like Inferno, for example. That was a real land.
Yeah, I think some of them divide opinion a bit more than others, don't they? Like Starscream, the new Starscream, things like that. And you've both said that you felt that the Starscream was a little bit off for different reasons or whatever, whereas I think it's pretty spot on. But I think what interests me now is that you see those CAD designs from those Masterpiece toys now being reused in like War for Cybertron and things like that. So like the one that really got me was like Prowl, for example. First seeing the WFC Prowl toy. It's just the Masterpiece head on a new toy. It's mad.
And Masterpiece Prowl has one of the best head sculpts I've ever seen on a Transformers toy. And that Masterpiece head sculpt on WFC Prowl almost made me want to buy it because it's so good. And it just shows again that a perfect head sculpt can do a great job for a toy.
At the risk of saying it, it's my favourite bit of the WFC toy. Do you know what I mean? Because it's where all the character comes from and whatever else. It's really, really good. And I think, I'm not knocking it at all. It's a very clever thing that they've done because they've taken, they're not exact replicas. Like there are changes made to them. I noticed it on Blue Streak actually that was very close with the Masterpiece, very close. But they're taking designs that have been done clearly. There was some debate about it. I think I posted about it online and someone was trying to quibble it with me and saying that they didn't think it was true. And I was like, just look at them. Do you know? Look at them side by side. It's clear to me as day that that's what they're doing with some designs. But I think it makes total sense. But what is interesting is that it says that they've kind of come to a place where they've found what they believe is the kind of formula or the sort of best representation that they can get for some of these characters, and they're reusing it. So because it's all about homaging the past in WFC as well as Masterpiece, there's almost no need to recreate them. The other one that really struck me was Dinobot, because that head it's so weird to me. I don't own it, but when I see pictures of the Kingdom toy, it's the Masterpiece head on a completely different toy.
Is that not the case with Kingdom Beast Wars Megatron too?
Not as much. No, actually, that one I think is a bit of a departure. That looks different to me.
Do you think though that it is a case of they're just reusing the Masterpiece heads, or do you think there's a case where they're both going for the same thing now, and they're designed by a lot of the same people anyway? So we are getting to a point where they are just going to look the same anyway, because they're targeting that, aren't they?
No doubt. And I think in Megatron's case, actually, that's what it is, I think, because I don't see the same immediate commonalities necessarily. I think that is just literally that the two designs kind of come to a point where they're chasing the same goal so closely. But I do definitely believe that in some cases, like Prowl, Blue Streak, Dinobot, man, look at Masterpiece, Dinobot, and the Kingdom toy.
No, I agree with you completely. I remember that example.
Oh, definitely with Dinobot.
It's the same head. It's the same head. It's not... There are small changes, small tweaks made, I think, in the molding or whatever it is that they've done with it, but it's the same head design that they've worked from initially, the same file. And that to me is mad.
I'm wondering if they're going to go the other way with it, because the way they've been doing the Generations head sculpts for the last couple of years, they're spectacular. They are so good. And some of them you look at them and go, they can't be bettered. And I can only see them upscaling them again, and they'd work because they're obviously, I think it's a similar team, isn't it? We know that some of the Masterpiece people have moved over and been doing.
I think, particularly like old Hasui and people like that you've had working on some mainline toys and things like that, haven't you? So
like you say with the head, if they get something and it's already perfect, why not just upscale it or downscale it where it needs to be and where it works?
I think, it'll be fascinating the first time you see a Masterpiece toy come out that has a head that looks like a Kingdom toy or something like that. That'll be really quite something. Very bizarre.
So why haven't they done that with Soundwave then? Because we've had enough G1-based Soundwaves. Is that the case there too? Like you take the really spot-on Masterpiece head and it's been recreated for Generations class Soundwaves? Because it wasn't for Titan's Return. That was a very different look for Soundwave there.
I think bizarrely, the Soundwave Masterpiece head kind of comes from an era of mixed design, though, doesn't it? It comes from an era of a bit of toy, a bit of cartoon, a bit of comic, and kind of blended influence. And I think actually Takara, maybe, and Hasbro have sort of moved on from that a little bit to a place of pure cartoon. So like Prowl is so close to the cartoon that kind of fits it, And
but Prowl was literally the next one after Soundwave, wasn't it?
I know, but yet it's so much more cartoony in its original Masterpiece design. Particularly the Plus version.
Sideswipe is another example, actually.
Yeah, that's true. The Siege toy is very close in that regard, but it does
almost better, actually.
Yeah, it's better defined.
I think so.
Yeah, it's better defined, actually, I would say. I only have the Tiger Track version, but yes, the face is really nice on that.
The Masterpiece Sideswipe's head has become how I think of Sideswipe's head now, because I've seen it on the Siege toy as well. Like you're saying there, it's so similar. But when I see renditions of the cartoon one, like third parties have done, it just looks weird and wrong.
Yeah.
So I was like looking at the Alternators one as well. It looks cool, but my head now is just rewritten Sideswipe's head to look like that.
That's one of the weakest Alternators head sculpts. That Sideswipe Lambo.
I would agree. But isn't that it though? What you were saying there, Liam? Because it's like, because we've seen some of these heads. And it's not many, maybe, but there are some real, like the Sideswipe one is a real classic example, because we've seen them used on so many different versions of the Masterpiece mold and now on several versions of the Siege mold and everything from beyond that, and then Earthrise and everything, it's almost become the stock look for that character, hasn't it? It's become how we think of that character.
Yeah.
I think it's happened to Skyfire now as well.
Yeah.
Like you had the Commander class one in Siege, and then you had the Generation Skyfire, both utterly gorgeous, by the way. And even Classics, was a little bit in that direction, and now that is just the look. But then you've also got the Valkyrie style helmet that is always accompanies it. So they sort of fall into this tick box thing of you must. So that, yes, they have an established look now, whereas some other characters do vary quite a lot.
An established look is a great way of putting it, because we've touched on this before about how new designs are pretty much always follow that template, don't they? It's the G1 cast. Transformers has moved now to more of like iconography, hasn't it? Using specific characters. And it might look slightly different, but it's very similar. And I think it's the same with the head there. You were saying that's the head now. That's what it will always look like.
That's it, exactly.
Slight changes.
I think the danger with that, maybe, is that you get into a bit of a place with it, don't you? Into a bit of a rut. I mean, when will we see the next Ironhide that doesn't look like that? That's the thing, because you're never going to get the old seat head Ironhide. Yeah, it's never going to happen again, is it? Let's be fair. That's not going to... I mean, it would be an amazing thing if it happened. I'd love to see it in a funny way, but it's never going to happen. Equally, Movieverse Ironhide, it feels now actually like those Movieverse designs, some of them are like real... like a moment in time, they feel very of their era, and it's almost because the designs have gone so far back to G1, so heavily, so quickly.
Such proliferation as well in a short period of time. Like look at Bumblebee.
Yeah,
I mean G1 Bumblebee head now is once again the norm, isn't it? Like you got it on the Buzzworthy toys. Wait, he didn't really have a WFC toy, did he?
He did. He had.
Which one was it?
Was it the Netflix one?
Yeah, the one that most people seem to think is a downscale version of the Masterpiece, because the engineering is really similar. But he's got a really nice face sculpt. But he's a good case because his head sculpts are never the same. They're always the G1 style, but they always look quite different in a way that most characters don't get now. It's really strange.
Isn't there like a really small Legends class one now, which has the kind of G1 cartoon style face that the most recent MP had?
Yeah, the core class one.
Okay. So, I mean, there is a possibility that will then become the stock face now that they've nailed that look on the highest end version of G1 Bumblebee and almost the lowest end, with all respect intended to size, class, and price point, that maybe that will just become the homogenous look.
I think so.
For Bumblebee going forward now.
He does feel like one they've struggled with, doesn't he? Because the first Masterpiece for years, people complained about the face a lot, didn't they? That was a
get the battle mask. It's the better look anyway.
I always liked the face on that thing, MP21.
MP21 was a fabulous toy.
Yeah,
all round, top drawer Transformers toy.
It's one of the most toy-like masterpieces, and I think that's one of the reasons it's so good.
Yeah, but then the face on MP45 was a real weird one, because that for me was the one that didn't work so well, actually, taking it from the cartoon, because it was like what someone had done was printed off a picture of the character from the cartoon, or the animation model or whatever, and drawn the lines where they were, and then sort of rendered that into a 3D image, and then that's what you've got. And somewhere the translation of that, it just doesn't quite work. There's like a little bit of translation of that 2D image that needs to happen for it to really work perfectly in 3D form. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they nail it. I mean, some of the examples you gave, I would agree with. Megatron, probably the ultimate example of that. Spot on perfect. Honestly,
Skyfires, the recent Skyfires and Jetfires have knocked it out of the park.
But just that MP45 Bumblebee for me, it has all the right elements. It's all there, but it just doesn't mesh together somehow to really convince me of. I don't look at it and hear the voice necessarily. That's the thing.
No, but the thing is, I think the core class did it better.
Maybe.
In a way, I think that's the closest they've gotten to making the cartoon face work, and I wonder if they're going to evolve that to then nail it for an eventual third Masterpiece. I don't know, or some yay.
But like the Cliff Jumper that we've seen pictures of, which still hasn't been officially announced, by the way, I think the Cliff Jumper head looks really good.
There's amazing leaked photos.
Yeah. Let's not get into that again. But it's really coloured my perception of that toy. I'm joking, but I think the head on that does look good, to be fair. But yeah, I think it's such a fascinating point. But I suppose just going back a step, I do wonder now if we're going to get to a point where actually we can't kind of get out of this realm of these characters having to look the same way every time. It's almost like they've become, you've got your established Bumblebee archetype, your established Sideswipe archetype, and then like you can't move away from it too far, otherwise it's not instantly recognizable as that character.
Will we ever get another non-third party toy Mirage head with top half being blue with the yellow eyes and just that kind of face, or will it always just be
Yeah.
another iteration?
We had it in WFC, didn't we? They did do it, but they only put it on the clear one.
Oh, I see.
They did the
Okay.
toy
That's
head.
true.
Didn't they?
Yeah, they did, didn't they?
And it's a shame because it looks beautiful. Like I've seen people paint it and it looks amazing.
Right.
So I guess then there is always the possibility that someone will resurrect an older mod. I disagree with you, Sixo. I think we will get a windscreen face Ironhide before too long.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think so, because I think you can only go so many places with Ironhide before it starts becoming...
It goes back again.
Yeah, I think it would just be such a wild thing for them to do, and it's always possible that they will do a highly toy-based mainline subset at some point, because there are so many things they could do. Battle Mask Bumblebee, Toy Face Mirage, Toy Face, or toy windscreen head Ratchet, and things like that are real possibilities, I think.
It does go different ways. I guess I was thinking of two things.
Tracks.
One that, Tracks is a good example. The one that I was thinking of first was that actually some third-party companies, you mentioned third-party, Fans Toys, have stopped doing a lot of toy faces and things, or had done, but now they've started to bring it back with stuff like their latest Soundwave and things like that, and their new Blaster that they've just unveiled have both got toyetic faces to them. And there are companies like X-Transbots doing very toy-heavy repaints, stuff like MP36 Plus and things like that, which has got the toy face. So some of those things are coming back a little bit as a kind of alternative, which is really interesting. And another thing I just thought of, actually, which I have to throw in here because it's fascinating to me, and I hope it's true, maybe it's not, but did you see there was a post, I think it was on social media somewhere, that someone talking about the seat faces, the windscreen faces for Ironhide and Ratchet, and they compared them to the Movieverse faces. Did you see this?
I don't think so.
Oh man, I'll find a link for you, but it's fascinating. So they took, for example, the original G1 toy Ratchet face on the seat, like a scan of it or whatever, and they synced it up with the Ratchet Movieverse 2007 face. It's not that far off.
Oh, I have seen that actually.
Yeah,
and
I'm not
you
even
are right,
kidding.
yeah.
It's not that far off. Ironhide as well. Like I don't want to say it's a dead ringer or anything, but you look at two things long enough side by side and you can start to see, a bit like with you just saying about the Bumblebee with the G1 toy, that you could see that maybe there was some cues there. So maybe we have already had seat face.
Yeah, just goes to show you need the windscreen too.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
Now's the part of the episode where we go to our sponsors' websites and we have a little look at what they're offering this week. And we're going to start with tfsource.com, primarily masterpiece third-party Transformers, but also vintage and mainline. Guys, what have you seen on the website that's caught your eye?
I am currently looking at that TR2 Commander of Stars. Is it Energon or Cybertron Optimus Prime? It's like a third-party version.
Oh, it's Cybertron, yeah, Galaxy Force.
It's just a winged maniac. It looks really cool.
Yeah, it does look amazing.
What about you, Sixo? What's caught your eye?
Definitely that, I have to say, really into that. I mentioned that in a article just the other day, actually, as it goes. Also quite bizarrely into the Make Toys Skyclone that's up there, the purple one.
Really nice colours on that, yep.
Lovely colours. And it's so bizarre because it's a toy that I have multiple versions of already. I mean, it's like any Seeker mold. It's like, oh, another one. But we've never had a masterpiece or third-party purple one, Hotlink, before. So that's something a little bit different. So definitely going to have a look to get one of those in hand. Kind of makes me want to track down their yellow one now.
The Sunstorm.
That they did, yeah. Can't remember what it was called now offhand, but never got that one. And now I'm thinking maybe that's a bit of an oversight.
I'm looking at the Iron Factory EX20D Tyrant Wing Desert Rose, and that is not the song by Sting.
Oh, you beat me to it.
This is basically the Iron Factory Legends class ramjet in the G2 Sandstorm colours, which is with the desert camo.
Oh, nice.
So any rendition of this figure that is made, I will love. The only thing that's missing are the teeth on the nose cone. But otherwise, that's just fantastic. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, that's a smart little thing. That looks really cool. All that Legends stuff I'm well into, man. I don't know any of it, but it always looks intriguing to me. And I think, considering how small some of it is, just looks exceptional, some of the designs.
Yeah, no, I used to have the, I think it was Iron Factory Mirage, and that was just brilliant. And their smokescreen was fantastic too, before they started to become more and more G1 in their looks. But yeah, the Mirage was amazing. It's astonishing what they accomplish at that scale these days.
Yeah.
I had the Tarn, and it was really, really nice. The engineering they managed to put into such tiny little figures is fantastic.
Oh, man. I often look at them and just think, I mean, we joke about mini masterpieces or whatever. Those are proper little mini masterpieces. And I often think, man, if you could have a collection that looks like that at that scale, what a space saver, right? Just think of the
Well,
practicality.
people do now with
I
like
know.
Magic Square and New Age. Those companies have moved into that as well, and much more G1 scale.
There are people that have ditched third party and Masterpiece and just gone into, Legends
Yeah.
and all of that and New Age and stuff. And I can see why.
I think the New Age Jazz was especially amazing. That little thing, I can't remember what it was called, but that was an especially attractive one at that scale.
The Seeker mod they did, the Starscream, is incredible. Our friend Josh brought it to the pub once, and I was just fascinated by it. Incredible little toy.
Well, moving on to gearforgeeks.co.uk, obviously a UK-based retailer, but also with a very strong used, pre-owned Transformers and other toy lines sections on there. Anything caught your eye on there? I mean, obviously last week highlighted the rather well-priced Robots in Disguise and vintage pre-Transformers, but anything else caught your eye?
There's something on there that I'm amazed is still there, which is the Mastermind Creations Coulter, which is their Tarn, because that's normally quite high in demand, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an instant sell. Whenever I see that on a Facebook group or something, someone getting rid of that, it's just gone immediately.
Yeah. I was amazed to see that actually there are a couple of third-party items on there. I hadn't appreciated that under pre-owned other toys that there was actual third-party items on there as well. So there's a couple of bits in there definitely that have kind of caught my eye that look pretty cool. I was just kind of combing through some of the Generation 1 vintage stuff as well. A couple of like mini bots, like a nice little Warpath on there, things like that. And a reasonably priced Stalker for 18 quid, which I think looks great. And that is a must-have toy, in my opinion. Like if you love G1 toys, that's a gotta-have right there. So someone should definitely snap that up.
I decided to look in the accessories section for vintage, and I found a couple of things which made me smile. One of them is it's a Generation 1 Arcana vintage brainstorm head, which I think is very on topic for us for this episode.
Yeah, I saw that. I love that head.
Sadly, that's sold, but it's still there, and it just shows you should keep an eye on the accessories there, because if you can find G1 vintage Headmaster heads on there, that's a place to keep your eye on. But the thing that caught my eye was the Transformers G1 vintage Action Master Wheeljack Turbo Racer pre-owned for $8.99. Because it is a Ferrari Testarossa, I just think it'd be great to grab one of those and just paint it white. Just have a white Testarossa that other Transformers can sit in. It would just be brilliant. Because then you could do like...
I love that we always talk about the white Testarossa. That's like...
Yeah, we could just make like a Sonny Crockett Action Master, and that'd just be fantastic.
It needs to come with a little soundbox that plays Crockett's theme just in the background.
There you go. With today's technology, I'm sure you could turn that thing into a tiny little MP3 player.
Oh, imagine if it was inside, like in the actual dashboard, like a little button you press where the stereo would be.
Well, doesn't this whole Action Master vehicle thing have like pop-out guns?
Oh, it's got a whole like Omnibot style attack mode. Turns into like a little jet.
It's just basically just combine Blaster and that thing and turn it into a little music player and make it white, and it'll play Crockett's theme. Somebody please do that. So thank you to tfsource.com and gearforgeeks.co.uk for being our sponsors. Remember to check out those websites for all your Transformers and third-party needs.
We now return to the Transformers.
So another thing I want to talk about with regards to head sculpts on Transformers toys is Gimmickry. And this obviously started quite a way back in 1987 with Headmasters. So very early on in Transformers, the head was identified as a section of the toy that could also engage beyond just being the recognizable face of a toy. So that could obviously be removed and it would become a smaller robot. Then we've had gimmicks like light piping, where you've got these panels on behind the head and they shine through the eyes. There are some toys that do this exceptionally well. Things like...
I think to give it its proper title, it's, isn't it, light piping?
Light piping.
And successful light pipe toys like G1 Rotorstorm, all the Turbo Masters. I totally didn't get that reference, so I'm just going to gloss over it and carry on.
Yeah, fine.
Car Robots.
No sell it. That's what it did.
What is it? It's Robots in Disguise Scourge. The other day you proposed on Twitter was the best light pipe toy, but you were obviously wrong, and it's G1 Rotorstorm.
I knew it was Rotorstorm. I was just looking for the engagement. I set you up with it.
You were stirring up a hornet's nest.
Exactly.
I was happy to add to your numbers.
Yeah, I gave you the number 2 toy in the post in the hope that it would spark some debate and someone like yourself would come back with the number 1 toy.
Chaotic Sixo in the house.
That's it.
I am more than happy to be the number 1 to your number 2.
Thank you, number 2. Or you number 1. I don't know. I'm confused now.
Numbers were never my thing, evidently. Liam would be O.
It's just O.
I was going to say, didn't you used to be a maths teacher?
Used to be. It's amazing how fast that stuff goes away,
Yeah.
But anyway, Gimmickry with head sculpts. I remember the moving mouth plate on MP1, for example, was...
that was a big thing.
Yeah, it's a very simple thing, but it was still it's amazing.
That was a huge thing, actually. Hard to probably appreciate now what a big thing that was. Like, oh my god, the faceplate moves. It was like a huge deal on that toy. Just for ages, it was like the kind of de facto go-to standout gimmick for that kind of thing. Like, I think if it happened now, it'd just be like, yeah, faceplate moves. That's cool. But it sort of moved on.
It would be cool on a mainline toy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be cool on a mainline toy, but I don't think it'd be as knockout, you know. But yeah, there's tons of those sorts of gimmicks over the years. Even like swappable faces and things is kind of ties into that, doesn't it?
Why do you think we don't see the movable mouth plate again? Like, we never really see it, do we? It hadn't occurred to me. I always think of it as one of the great gimmicks on a toy, but we never really see it.
On Prime specifically, or on toys in general?
Some Transformers toys in general.
There are some that do it, like some third-party toys that I could name that do have it, specifically like having moving mouths and things like that. And some of the stuff like the movie Masterpiece toys do it. So like Ratchet has a moving mouth, Ironhide does, the MPM toys. So it does happen. It does pop up sometimes.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a nice little thing. Some of the Beast Wars masterpieces as well, actually. Dinobot does things like that. So there are examples of it that you see out there. I think it is a real nice thing because I think anything like that means that you're not having to constantly swap faces. Like Dinobot does come with swappable faces, but the fact that you can get a kind of bit of play value out of the face and the expression from something inherent in the design itself, I think is really nice.
You mentioned swappable faces. I think one of the first examples I owned of that was animated Blitzwing with 3 faces, and I thought that was a tremendous gimmick. And even though it didn't flip through the faces particularly smoothly, on that toy and also on, I think it was MP3, wasn't it? MP3 Starscream, where it was like the rotating inbuilt. Yeah. I found those to be pretty cool solutions. And obviously nowadays it's a lot more slick. And even though they're not all integrated, you've just got like MP36 Megatron is a great example of how easy it is to swap between the faces.
Yeah, that integrated face swap thing has not gone away. I mean, like MPM, again, the Optimus Prime, the face kind of pulls forward, twists round and slots back into place. And you don't have to remove anything. So there's no there's no accessory as such. So that's a really cool solution. I like how that's done. It's not too dissimilar to Starscream, actually, MP3 Starscream in that regard. But yeah, these days, Masterpiece is much more common, isn't it, to have literally tons of faces in a little accessory bag or whatever.
And this stuff has made it to mainline. Now you've got Studio Series 86 Hot Rod with the flip down visor. So obviously I think that started with alternators. No, Kiss Players Rodimus.
Classics, wasn't it?
No, Classics doesn't have a flip down visor. It was the...
Oh, does it not? No, it doesn't, does it? You're right.
Kiss Players Rodimus was the first one who had it.
No, you're right, yeah.
Clear one.
You're right.
And then obviously we had Alternators Rodimus who had it as well. And now we had MP9, which had a really lovely one. And I think they've basically got to the point where it's easy enough to implement it without too much hassle that we can have it on a Studio Series Generations class figure, as we do with Studio Series Hot Rod. And that's a really lovely thing, having that visor on that toy, even though there have been some damaged ones now and then.
Chip the face paint on mine.
Yeah, that's going to happen when the face is painted. But actually, painted faces is a nice segue into another element of head sculpts and gimmickry, which is if the face is painted sometimes, you think, well, that's a real bonus. But I think it was Kingdom Rodimus recently where someone removed the silver paint on the face and it was done in a more flat grey. And it's almost like the definition came out much better and it made for a nicer looking head sculpt.
I saw that, and I'd never been quite convinced on that face sculpt. I thought the toy itself looks nice, but the face just never quite worked for me. And that flat grey, amazing. Looked so much better, I thought. And it is interesting sometimes when you think that actually the person designing the toy, maybe doesn't have the final say on some of the finish or whatever, and they've designed it in a particular way. I guess it's like comic book line art, isn't it, versus the kind of final colour that goes in. Sometimes, it can make all the difference. And that was just a great example of it right there for me.
And when you cover stuff in paint, it's going to sink into like little gaps and stuff, isn't it? Sometimes, so it will cover up certain details and it will soften them.
Yeah.
Rodimus is a great example.
Yeah, you can kind of really lose the definition of the face and kind of I think in a way, like if you take a facial expression as kind of a gimmick in itself, you can kind of lose that a bit. The one I was thinking of actually was, you probably haven't seen it, but Tigerhawk from Beast Wars, really lovely face design.
Is that the one with the grimacing teeth, which is all in white and it just gets washed out, basically?
It's white upon white. It's got a visor, like a greenish visor over the eyes, which is cool. But all of the the actual face definition is completely lost. And it's a lovely toy. I really like the toy, but the face is a disappointment. Not because of the way it looks, but only because of the definition of it. It's completely nondescript.
I wrote an article for TF Source blog years ago on head sculpts, and I got contributions from people and asked them what their favorite head sculpt was. And Pior contributed that one, Tiger Hawk.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. And I really struggled to see the details on that face and the photo he provided, but I could see the teeth, but I couldn't really understand why he'd picked that. And I guess it must be one that you just appreciate in hand much more. But that was his choice for best head sculpt.
I think it is, even in hand, man, it's hard to read, but I would say I can understand why he's picked it in the regard that it is a decent sculpt in theory, but the actual practice of it is not so good. Do you know what I mean? It's I don't know. I like the idea of it. I think the execution of it stumbles. I'm sure that when it was designed on a computer or however it was done at the time, back in the late 90s, I'm sure it looked fantastic. But it's the translation to plastic that hasn't quite worked in that instance.
Yeah, and there are a few sometimes where they cover them in paint, but it's like, if they've got a visor as well, but it's all one colour. Like I'm thinking of G1 Crosshairs, where his face is all blue, but you kind of lose the fact that there's a visor separated there. And
well, Crosshairs is like the other two, isn't it? It's an all white face.
Yeah, I mean, it's all covering it, isn't it? So you don't see like all of the detail there. Whereas if you pick that visor out in a different colour, suddenly that whole face comes together differently. But when it's all one colour, it sort of masks it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is down to the finish and the paint and things like that to already kind of pick out the details. But there are also like faces that have been mangled over the years and things as well, aren't there? Like Jazz and things like that.
Oh, poor G1 Jazz.
With the old smushed face. That's really not been done justice.
Yeah, which one was that? Was it the...
That was the book box TF collection reissue of it. And then the eHobby Gold version had the same kind of mess on it. And even the commemorative series release. So all three of those releases around the same period were afflicted with it until the Encore sort of fixed it.
It was getting softer, wasn't it? With later releases of it anyway. It was getting quite soft.
I can't remember if Ricochet and Stepper had the same problem when it was done.
Better, I think.
It must have been better. They must have sorted it by then.
I think it's better. Yeah, I have one of them, and I think it's better.
I mean, you're talking about face sculpts that maybe haven't been done well, or elements of them that haven't worked or have deteriorated over time. We mentioned light piping a little while ago. One of the saddest things is a light pipe toy where the actual panel at the back has been painted over, so you can see the toy was meant to have light piping, but it doesn't. And when it's done right, it just blazes through. And we talked about Rotorstorm and Scourge, but I'm guessing we're all massive fans of light piping.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favourite things. I like a good face sculpt, but the light piping takes it to another level. Mostly when it's on a visor. I always find when they have like a hot pink visor or something like that, or
Boss.
Yeah, it just looks perfect. Like the Turbo Masters head sculpt are some of my favourites, and that light piping is so important to that.
The funny thing about light piping for me was they really perfected it in that late G1 kind of Turbo Master era. I mean, toys beyond it as well, like Clinch and Pyro and those guys. And then it was almost like they had this lightning in a bottle, and then it's sort of never been done quite as well ever since. Like, I mean, I would extend it to Generation 2, which was where Scourge originates from as well, of course. But I've never seen it done quite as well as on those toys.
Classics
somehow.
Megatron.
No, that's a fair shout.
Recently, I've just been handling that next to my PC screen, and every time it's anywhere near the PC screen, the green eyes just blaze. And I just thought, yeah, that's a toy that does it absolutely brilliantly. And again, it has that same effect of presence and life. It gives the character life. It gives the head sculpt life.
I could see that. I guess my only thing with light piping is that fantastic when it works, but it sucks when it doesn't.
Yeah.
As you said, when the back of the head's been painted over, or when it's just, I don't know, it just doesn't work particularly well, it totally deadens the toy, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's it. You get dead eyes instead of painted eyes, which would have been better.
And there are instances, there are toys, and it's a bit the same with light up eyes for me. Like as a general rule, am not so keen on light up eyes, but I do like it when it works really well. So like on a lot of 3.0 toys, the light up eyes are amazing, but they also don't look dead when they're not on, which I think is fantastic. So whereas actually, you do get, particularly on a lot of third party examples, nowadays you get light up eyes, but then if you don't turn the switch on or you don't have the batteries, the eyes are very nondescript. They almost just look blackened out.
Yep.
And the toy looks dead as a result.
And I almost always find myself not bothered to get that specific type of battery to operate them. Like I've got it on Meg Tyranno from Fans Hobby. I mean, that's probably going to look wonderful with lit up eyes and Canon. I just can't be bothered to source the battery to do it. So it's got this exact issue that you're talking about. It's got dead eyes.
Yeah.
The thing is with like light up eyes is how often you're going to use it. It's a fun feature for the 1 second you switch it on, see it, go, oh, that's cool. But then when you put it on the shelf, you're not going to leave it like that. But the thing with light piping is it's not like it all the time, but it's just a wow moment every now and then where you pick something up and you just move it without thinking and light catches it. It's like, whoa, it's a beautiful thing, and it's hard to replicate that with lights because you actively have to be looking to do that.
It's the opposite with some that do it well. For example, I think it was Quakewave or MP Laserwave. They had fantastic eye. It's just a really simple switch, and I would just leave it on, and then it would run out, and then I couldn't be bothered to change it because it looked so good with the light switched on. Shockwave is great for that.
It really did look good. I mean, that said, though, the light piping on the MP Laserwave is really good as well, and I find does catch the light nicely. The one actually talking about Masterpiece real briefly, and it's not really light piping as such, but made such a difference was obviously MP10, where they inexplicably gave it dead eyes, didn't they? They gave it like
for the Takara release,
yes, and then Hasbro repainted it and gave it these really lovely, vibrant, painted blue eyes, and it just looked terrific. And it's funny how I would say that change overall, generally speaking, I probably prefer the Takara version because it's like loaded in paint and looks really nice, and the Hasbro one is bare red plastic, for example. But the change in the eyes just makes all the difference to me, and just takes it from what could have been the better version of the toy. I think actually the Hasbro one gets elevated because of it.
Yeah, like I have the Hasbro MP010, and it's
what even is that, man?
But I was thinking of like the Siege Optimus Prime. The head they've done for that is probably my favorite Optimus Prime head they've ever done. It's incredible. But they did it in Netflix, and they just added like yellow to the eyes, and it's incredible. Whereas the other one, it just looks dead because of, again, they now like to have that dark eye thing, which I think comes from the light piping.
Yeah, I think it's almost like an attempt at light piping, but not really, isn't it? And it's the same on the Earthrise one actually that I have, where it would be like one critique I do have of that is the eyes are just very nondescript, very plain. And as you said, if they had a nice little dash of yellow paint or something, it would look amazing. So I think there is absolutely an argument for painted eyes, in my opinion. I think I love light piping when it works, but at least with painted eyes, you know that you're guaranteed that they're going to look great all the time. Do you know what the one I cannot get on with as well is chromed eyes?
Really?
Doesn't work for me as well. Yeah, no. Okay. Like a lot of Fans Toys figures have chromed eyes, and like Fans Hobby do it a bit as well. I'm just not a big fan. I like when it works, but the problem is unless you have the head completely square on to your eye line, the two eyes are lit differently. They catch the light differently, and particularly in photographs, it can be a real mare. Actually, so it's like more of a photographer's complaint than anything. But I do find it a pain in the bum, honestly, because you tilt the head to one side and you can see one eye looks dead and the other eye catches the light dead on. It's a real bugger.
I noticed something similar like that with the new Studio Series Wheeljack, the one based on the Bumblebee movie, where I took a photo and I noticed in the photos one of his eyes looks blue and one of them looks green. And when I looked at the toy, it's not like that. It's from the lighting, and it's just the way it captures the light, the way they're painted changes the colour.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Reflections and stuff.
But is it fair to say that if a toy is light piped well, there is no problem with having a massive part of the back of its head just transparent plastic? Like that absolutely doesn't detract at all from it because of the effect that it gives when done right.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. Well, who's looking at the back of the head anyway? But it's such a cool effect.
Yeah. And another question on the same kind of topic. How do we feel about coloured, for example, faces that are coloured in unconventional robot face colours, like green for Fangry or yellow for Quake or pink for Misfire?
Love it, man.
Right?
Love it. Cool. Fangry's a great example, that green face. Immaculate, honestly. I would happily see more of that. I think it's like there's something about those late G1 designs that really kind of got into that. And I think, they are robots. They don't have to be traditional colours of any kind. You can go crazy with it and get really colourful. And I think that's brilliant. Yeah, green faces, whatever. Just go for it, man.
Computron with his red face, under the visor.
Yeah, it's
stuff
cool.
like that. It's just unique as well to see, because so often they're just silver.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of Trax as well. How lovely the Masterpiece Trax face is.
Yeah,
with a white helmet, beautiful head sculpt. I think that's one of the ones they absolutely nailed by going with cartoon. Yeah. I really love that.
Very striking.
Yeah, and then Loud Pedal with its beautiful teal face is another beautiful example. So yeah, all for that.
He got the faceplate, didn't he, as well?
He did. Yeah, it was supposed to come with swappable. That was what the Proto had. It had a swappable, but it was fixed for the final production.
I wish the actual Trax had that as well. That's the thing I would like more, is more swappable heads like that. Now we seem to just get the toy head a lot. Well,
the cartoon head, unfortunately, is all we get for Trax these days.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. We get the cartoon heads a lot, don't we, for everything now. So it'd be nice if they included the option.
But then having said that, I found Masterpiece Sunstreaker to be really weird with its cartoon face. It just had a massive chin on him. And I remember when I took a photograph from a lower elevation and it sort of cut off the bottom of his chin. It was gorgeous. And I thought, when they do this mold with a toy style head, it's going to be irresistible. And then they did Cordon and Spin Out, and there was something not quite right about it. With maybe it was the size, I don't know, maybe it was the expression, or it didn't quite sing. I don't know what it was. Like, Sixo, you own them both.
Yeah.
Do you think they're excellent representations of the G1 Sunstreaker head, which is one of the greatest head sculpts of all time?
Well, it's a bit of a leading question, isn't it?
Yeah,
You really kind of led.
Is it as good as that in hand on the Masterpiece?
I think it does a good job at representing the original toy, yes, to be honest. I don't necessarily think that the original Sunstreaker head is one of my favourites of all time. So in that regard, I'm very happy with the Masterpiece take on Corden and on Spin Out. I think it does for me, it does a good enough job. I really like it. But I also like the cartoony head on MP Sunstreaker as well, MP39. I think it works. It looks like the cartoon to me. And the chin, everything, I like it. But, I like the cartoony head on MP plus Smokescreen. And I know you're not so keen. And a lot of people really don't like that because they're like, whoa, chin. It's got like a lot of chin. I mean, it does have a lot of chin. But I like it. I'm into it. Give me more chin.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't quite get on with the original Smokescreen.
I remember.
19 head either.
You wrote an article about it.
Oh, how sad. But yeah, it's a fact. I think I just wanted it to look like he does in Megatron's Master Plan. That was the perfect Smokescreen face to me. And I just really wanted the Masterpiece to have that face.
Yeah, I think, again, maybe it's that thing we were talking about sort of towards the start, isn't it? Of almost like expecting something to represent what you want entirely. And when it's not quite close enough, it's not as there as it should be in your mind's eye. It's almost like it could just be a chasm away, isn't it? It doesn't work.
It described why I haven't bought MP52, because everything about that toy looks absolutely bang on. But that stoic expression on the normal stock face isn't just, it misses the mark. That for me, it was the mouth was too wide.
Yeah.
But any sort of expression that him or the MP Thundercracker are pulling, they look amazing. Like, that's the one. But I can't have him displayed like that the whole time. I wanted the stoic face to be perfect too. And it's just such a massive investment but I don't think I'm ever going to get a perfect one then. Like, how are they going to do a better Starscream than this? It's not going to happen, is it? That's just it.
I mean,
take it or leave it, basically.
I got to tell you, I think that those faces on those toys really are great. But I hold it up there with Megatron. Maybe not quite Megatron, but in the same sort of echelon as Megatron. I think it's excellent.
But that's the thing. Why isn't it as good as Megatron? Because if Megatron can be so perfect, and it's not just like from 99% to 100% is 1%. It's almost like it's another 99% that they've added. It's more than the sum of its parts in a way. It's a very weird analogy, but.
We keep coming back to Masterpiece Megatron as like the ultimate, and I think there must be a reason for it. I think it's because it captures the cartoon in a way that it looks entirely faithful. Like you can just look at it and you're instantly like, oh, it's cartoon Megatron. But and it is slavish, but it's not to the detriment of it actually looking like a nice face.
Right. Yeah.
So it's aesthetically pleasing under its own steam, but it still also looks like this thing that you want it to look like. And I think sometimes with Masterpiece, I think where people have an issue is where stuff goes, and WFC to an extent now as well, it goes so cartoon accurate, slavish, heavy, that actually it moves away from just looking nice by itself.
Yeah. I know a lot of people felt that way about MP Grapple.
Yeah, they did. Although, again, I really like that face sculpt.
Yeah, it's nice. But then I thought the very best version of that was the MP Artfire head. I thought that was the absolute pinnacle.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah.
Because it had the reflective silver face, but it was a toy-style face, and I just thought that's marvelous. That toy remains a massive success in every way.
Yeah, I think with all of it, isn't there? There's an element of close enough that is either acceptable to you or it's not. And so in some ways,
how much you care about the toy really in the face.
Yeah, maybe with something like Starscream, in a funny way, the MP tries to be so close and so slavishly identical to it that it almost, because it's not quite there for you, just that little bit that it's missing, it's almost like Uncanny Valley stuff, isn't it? It's
like Smokescreen.
Yeah. Whereas if it didn't try as hard to be as spot on, you would almost forgive it.
Like MP11 and MP3.
Yeah,
it's a funny old thing. But then you've got Prowl that absolutely nails it. So
it is a funny old business. It's eye of the beholder stuff all the way.
Yeah.
Smokescreen's one, I really wish they'd given a G1 toy style head, because when you see like the reissue box art where they use like Dreamwave art and stuff, and you see he's got the toys eye, and you're like, just want that as well, just as another option.
Yeah, it's a good point actually about the box art, because sometimes those faces and stuff, man, they just look so cool in the box art in a way that very few toys could ever really live up to. But
it's like, I don't think a Perceptor has nailed it yet either. I don't think any Perceptor has been absolutely bang on.
No.
The new Studio Series one looks really good.
You think so?
Yeah. I've got him. His face looks really nice. But I like the Titans Return one as well, because it was something a bit different.
It was, it was nice. I don't think that was going for bang on cartoon face. There were some great head sculpts in Titan's Return. Even though they were all headmasters, they still managed to create some of the best head sculpts I've ever seen. Like Titan's Return Quake is exceptional. That's one of the best head sculpts I've ever seen on a toy. And it's just a very basic head sculpt, but it's almost human. It's a very young human face, but that's just so good. So I think we've got to that point in the episode where we're going to start reeling off our favorite head sculpts. And so as not to take up too much time, we'll maybe focus on one or two each and then just list the rest. So Liam, do you want to start with your list of your favorite head sculpts in Transformers?
Some of my favorites are the Studio Series Bumblebee Optimus Prime, that head. That's pretty cool. X-Pants, I thought that was quite fun.
Can never not hear it as X.
That's what I thought you said. X-Pants. Yeah.
That guy, he looks quite cool. He's got a little lift-up faceplate thing.
He's a cool head.
X-Pants. Former trousers is basically what it sounds like.
MP01, that's a classic. Generation Select Black Zarek, another one.
That's nice. Really, really nice, yeah.
Oh, also, Universe Sunstreaker. I thought of that when we were talking about the Masterpiece. And I would have really liked that kind of head as well for the Masterpiece as an option. But two of my favourites are Turbo Master Flash.
Mm-hmm.
That is just a cool looking face. They've lent really into the Japanese super robot vibe with that. It's got like the Gundam like V crest thing going on, and that light piping is incredible. And that's just a wonderful toy anyway. But that face, all the Turbo Masters are great, aren't they? They've all got amazing heads. Yeah. But my second choice is G1 Metroplex, which is
nice.
I don't think gets like the credit it deserves at all. But I know we were talking about Crone face earlier, but when you look at that face, it's so cool. The big black helmet, everything about it, and it just feels big. Like Metroplex has got that chunk, but the face fits with that. But it's very reminiscent of, back in the 80s, you used to get all the like Diaclone style toy robots that your mates always had, like the little missiles and stuff. And they're always like, wow, what's this? Not a Transformer. I think it's a really underappreciated face sculpt, weirdly, Metroplex.
That's a really good one because Make Toys did Utopia and managed to make it look amazing. There's the Goodbye Convoy poster where you've got all those beautifully drawn G1 Transformers. Then you've got Metroplex's head just in the back in the same poster. And you just think, yeah, that guy has an amazing head design. And no, that's a top choice.
Giant cannons on the side as well,
Yes.
whatever they are.
That's a really good choice.
Can I also just give a quick shout out to the G1 Dinobots? Because each of their individual robot modes are...
Sludge, man.
Yeah, Sludge is it.
It's funny because I remember as a kid, when it got to season 3 and they just mostly were seen in Dino mode, I remember thinking, man, you're covering up those amazing robot modes, those heads. They're really cool sculpts.
Sixo?
I got a few that I noted down. A lot of G1, I'm going to be honest, but only because they're just some of the truly amazing head sculpts for me. Just the kind of cleanliness of design. There's something about the look of a lot of G1 head sculpts that just appeals to me greatly. Stalker, I think, is amazing. It's a Soundwave archetype, but I mean, it ended up being Soundwave and Machine Wars, didn't it? But you can see why. I just think it's exceptional. It's of that sort of face-plated visor design. It's just done so nicely. Beautiful light piping, again, really, really stunning. Sandstorm, I think, is a really good one. Very distinct. I always remember it as being quite unusual, but really love it. Inferno, G1, I think, is immaculate. Honestly, really lovely sculpt. Was resculpted, wasn't it, from Diaclone?
The grapple was.
Yeah, grapple, that's right. Yeah, I had to remember. I'm going to name a couple of maybe unusual ones. Cliff Jumper, G1 Cliff Jumper, I think is...
that was a great shout.
Beautiful head sculpt.
Perfection. Absolute perfection, that one.
That would be one of my top 5, maybe. I've not literally written out a list, but it's certainly going to be up there. Star Convoy, I think is, we're talking about Optimus Prime head designs, but I think Star Convoy for me is one that I look at consistently and I'm like, wow, that's a pretty head sculpt, definitely. Really kind of up there. I already mentioned Galaxy Shuttle, which I think is amazing. Six Shot.
Another great shout.
And the other one that I will sort of pay particular attention to, actually maybe just two more. One is Sonic Bomber, which is probably one that maybe a lot of people maybe not be familiar with, but it is just such a stunning head sculpt, honestly. It's got, again, kind of really sort of super robot vibe to it with this like really cool orange kind of head crest that comes down the middle, like an orange sort of stripe almost, but then these absolutely shocking green eyes, which is just so out there and just looks phenomenal. And then the final one, which is probably my favorite or kind of up there, certainly. I'm a big fan of the G1 Headmasters, 87 Headmasters, as you guys know. And I think Brainstorm is the one that really takes it for me.
Lovely. Yeah.
The toy.
Yeah.
Was always disappointed by the Japanese cartoon face for him, how they interpreted it with the mouth and everything. Just because I love the original toy and love the way it was portrayed, I didn't actually feel that the Rebirth cartoon quite got it either, even though it kept the faceplate. And probably only really the Marvel comic, with like the way that Jeff Senior drew him in particular, I just thought was great. And love it, and would love to see that done justice at some point.
What a great one to finish on. G1 Brainstorm.
Fantastic choice.
Great choice. A lot of mine I mentioned throughout the episode, and we've all mentioned like MP Prowl and MP Megatron, which I think are really beautiful. RID Bisque, I think, is quite hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lobster head. It's fantastic to me. I have Human Alliance Jazz on here as well, because I just remember that toy had such a distinct and weird head sculpt, but still jazz. And on the theme of being different from the original inspiration, but still very obviously identifiable, one of my all-time favorites is Alternator's Mirage. Because that's not your classic Mirage shape. It's so obviously Mirage. It's perfection. I have Car Robots JRX as well. I love old glass dome head over there with a really cool humanoid face underneath. I love how his eyes come through the visor. Just a beautiful one there. I've mentioned Sunstreaker, G1 Rotorstorm, possibly one of the best head sculpts of all time. Yeah. Just does G1 perfectly. It does robot, pretty, light piping, proportions, everything perfectly. And G1 Highbrow. I mean, you were talking about Brainstorm.
Yeah.
Highbrow is one I really love. I think it's my favorite of those, of any of the headmasters, Highbrow. I love the colors.
That's a really nice one.
And it's one I didn't really experience until an adult, being an adult. And something about the light grey head and the white painted face compared to the rest of the toy, which is very blue and the translucent red. Just what a beautiful toy. And I don't think the anime version of that head does it any favors. Because even though the Titans Return had the really big red sunglasses eyes, or blue, I just didn't like that. Which is why the fans project Browning 2 actually had a head that looked more like the G1 toy, which made that a really nice looking toy to me. So it's Highbrow, I mentioned Sunstreaker, mentioned Generations Jetfire, but G1 Hot Rod.
It was so nearly going to say
it's the one.
Yeah.
It's just G1 Hot Rod. I have a photo of him that I took, and I cycle through every now and then to repost on Twitter, maybe like an old photo or something I've posted before. And in my massive folder of pictures, that headshot of G1 Hot Rod always stands out. It's beautiful.
He's literally
it's perfection.
Right here next to me on my desk right now. I was actually playing, not with this copy, this is my Target Master copy. I was showing it to my boy the other day because he now has a G1 Hot Rod, which he loves, really into. And so we were comparing them, and there was a lot of questions about why this one has a little gun and the other one doesn't, and all of that kind of stuff. But he's quite taken with it, and I agree. The head sculpt is phenomenal.
That'll do it for head sculpts. We think after last time, the 3.5 hour RID and Car Robots marathon, it was best to keep this one succinct, and we've basically said all there is to say about head sculpts. We have a Patreon question from Chris Norris, and this is one of the perks of our Patreon, being able to ask questions that we will answer on the pod. The question is, how important is show accuracy to each of you? I personally prioritize toy accuracy over slavish dedication to show accuracy, but then I was into the toys before I ever saw the show, as far as G1 is concerned. And I think that actually ties into the topic we've covered today very, very well. So how important is show accuracy to you?
It's a difficult one because it kind of guides my collected, but it's not. I think there's a separation between show accuracy and being slavishly accurate. To like a lot of the masterpieces now, they look like the animation. Whereas if you go back to the Datsuns, they're cartoon accurate, but with other details in them. If that makes sense, it's a different style. And mine leans more toward that. When I see stuff that looks more like the animation, I'm less into it.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's kind of, it's a bit what I was saying earlier. I actually do like the animation look. I can understand why people don't. But, I'm not someone that just collects one style. So to me, it is important and it's not. I do like the animation look, and I do collect that in Masterpiece, and I'm very happy for that, particularly with stuff like Beast Wars. I think it's fantastic that it's like dead on to the cartoon. More than G1, actually. I sort of prefer that. But then equally, I do enjoy stuff that homages like the G1 toys and things like that as well. So I think it just depends. I'm kind of up for different things in different styles, if anything.
Yeah, for me, it's case-by-case basis as well. Like something like animated or car robots, I love how show accurate that is. But then at the same time, I collect classics and Henke, which doesn't subscribe to any one particular influence. Having said that, if they were to do a cartoon tomorrow, which included the classics aesthetic, I think if there was one major departure from one of those toys, it'd probably irk me a little bit. For example, if if the Mirage in the show had a very toy style head, but then I've got this more cartoony style head on the Classics Mirage toy, maybe that would bother me. But I collect enough of toy based, nothing based, and cartoon based that I can obtain enjoyment from different toys for doing different things. So it's absolutely not the highest priority for me at all.
Just to sort of sum up my thoughts a bit more, I guess I was just going to say that, like with G1 as an example, when you're younger and you collect G1, there's nothing else out there that looks like the cartoon. So it's almost like it's more important in a funny way because you don't have that ultra realized version. So when stuff like Brawn or Ironhide or whatever doesn't look like it, maybe it's like more of a big deal. But then over time we've had, I mean, how many cartoon Ironhides now? So actually the fact that some of those original toys look so different, I think is cool because it's its own thing. And I think that's happening more and more to a lot of toys as time moves on, you know, and they're 20 years old or whatever they are, you know, that you can appreciate them more for just being their own thing rather than trying to...
Like classics.
You know,
It feels like a lot of that appetite's been satisfied now, doesn't it?
Yep.
Like,
absolutely.
always wanting that to what it looked like on the screen. We've had it now, so you want a different experience.
Yeah. More legacy bulkhead, please. That sort of thing. Okay, and speaking of Patreon, remember you can sign up to our Patreon at patreon.com/Triple Takeover. We have 4 glorious tiers, everything from just being able to donate £1 a month to get our eternal thanks and to help keep the lights on, to being a Sixo's butler, where you can commission minisodes, exclusive minisodes, where we will cover a topic of your choosing based on the list that we provided, or voting in episode polls to help decide what we do in our main episodes and having a question answered, just like we did on Show Accuracy. And one of the perks of being a Sixo's butler is that you get a shout out on the show, and we have more butlers than ever. It's 1 year in, and the list is really, really long now. So hang on to your hats. I'm going to go through it now. A big thank you and shout out to Nick, Dean Watts, Danny Roberts, Chris C137, Andy, Preston, Brian Fox, Chris, Billy Ho, Spiderfather, Adam Shoemaker, Zachary Blader, Matt, Stephen Perkins, Bad Saturday, Justin Masaru, Dave Dalrymple, Absurd, Geo Kaiser, Yusufa, John Pearl, Cliff Saris, Troy Seth, Anthony Cars, Alec Meir, Captain R.A., Phil G, Jonathan False Logic Howard, Jacques Pelletier, Alicia aka Aliciatron, Sam Highland, Stuart Webb, Amar, Laserbeak, Puma the Hunter, Mike S, Vegemite Mike, Peter Hammerson, Andrew Bentley, Shenry, Chris Norris, Jesse Moreno, Jackson Arwood, Yip, MK Tronic, and Michael Loyacono. Thank you guys. What a list.
Wait, Laserbeak subscribes?
No, Laserbeak. It's 3 Zs.
Do you think he plays the podcast episodes back in Soundwave's chest?
Well, you know, we can be vinyl tech and we can also have it on cassette. I mean, I've been trying to push that merch on Sixo since the beginning.
Vinyl tech.
You know, do you remember vinyl tech?
Yeah.
We could do it. Our best-selling episode, we could stick it on vinyl.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure that would sell like hotcakes.
Vinyl does. Just look at Synthwave.
Podcast vinyl?
Yeah. Well, with all the music that Liam puts on the episodes, we could have like Crockett's theme, bit of Beast Wars theme tune.
Oh, the Triple Takeover hot mix.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Mixtape.
Little mixtape, maybe at Christmas for patrons.
Yeah. And speaking of merch, you can go to redbubble.com/people/triple takeover/explore, where we've got multiple designs, everything from M.A.S.K to our 1 year anniversary stuff to an actual Sixo's butler, an actual man in pig, and Poxy Rocket, all sorts based on numerous puns and jokes that we've covered in the episodes that people have sort of found funny and mentioned to us on social media, and people have been buying this stuff. I got my own Generation 2 Omnibot glove box mug in the other day, which I'm thrilled with. So go there, get some merch, get leggings, get stationery.
And then also want to say a big thank you to our sponsors for the evening. Of course, we've got tfsource.com and gearforgeeks.co.uk, as we mentioned earlier, so you can check them out for loads of Transformers, pre-owned Transformers, third party, the whole shebang.
And if you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at @triple_takeover and on Facebook at Triple Takeover, all one word.
And where can our followers find you, Liam?
I am at Toybox Soapbox on anywhere there is an at.
I'm at Sixo TF on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and I think that's it.
And I am at TFsquareone on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully you didn't find our choices too hard-headed or cerebral. Either way, it's time for us to head off. So go ahead and get your noodle out of our face.
This is like when my 4-year-old says he doesn't know how to put on trousers.
Well, I don't. I'm not wearing any now.